I would like to now invite Dr. Rajat Kathuria, CEO of ICRIER, to come and talk to us about forecast and action strategies for 2019 as far as the telecom sector is concerned. Dr. Kathuria.
Thank you, Abraham, and thank you very much for inviting me to deliver the opening remarks. Lots of friends in the audience. Good morning to all of you. I have a sort of, based on my experience in the sector and what the rest of the economy is doing based on what's happening in telecom, I have a story which sort of fits in the disruption and consolidation and how we should sort of react to it. Well, a story in the sense, a narrative that I've thought about based, as I said, on what's happened not only in telecom in India, but rest of the world. And it's a very simple narrative. Hopefully, it should sort of come out and reinforce itself, not only in this audience, but I think across the country, because it's important that we recognize that telecom is no longer a sector for its own sake, but it's a sector largely that has significant benefits and spillover effects on the other sectors. And we, as a country, should try and capture those benefits as much as possible. And the experience of the past has been, I mean, there are contradictory experiences in the telecom sector, and those contradictory experiences are that, as somebody was just saying, that it's a highly capital-intensive sector, and therefore one thought that if it's a capital-intensive sector, then you would have a few number of players that would dominate the sector. And indeed, that was the case in the beginning, but very soon, we had this last-mile disruption in some sense, where the cost of delivering telecom services obviated the need of cables, and the sector suddenly became competitive, or at least it encouraged entry, although I think the regulatory stance was calibrated, and we allowed entry in stages, and eventually we said, okay, let everybody come in and buy spectrum in the market. So from a position of limited entry or a position of really monopoly, which was the government public sector monopoly, we had a phase in which we had large entry into the sector. And that large entry, of course, as I said, was triggered by the fact that the entry cost or the barriers to entry were hugely reduced as a result of the last mile service delivery being possible without the need for laying cables. Like electricity, if you think today you have to lay cables, and therefore electricity delivery is not very competitive. We're trying to get competition there, but not very competitive. So telecom, that technological revolution that happened along with, I think, a lot with regulatory easing, allowed a proliferation of players in the industry. And we learned, the regulatory experience was that we learned from that and allowed entry to come in. Now, the network effects, as economists say, have kicked in. And, players will tend to become large. I mean, they will be the sort of winner-takes-all phenomena because of network effects, because of the natural tendency of people to sort of convalesce or sort of coincide with having just one player in the market or a few players in the market, and rest will be driven out. But the tendency of regulators when there are a few players in the market is to regulate, and sometimes regulate intrusively. And that's the narrative that I wish to sort of leave with you, not only with you, but hopefully with the larger set of stakeholders in the industry, is that we've been through this experience of easing. We've seen consolidation. I think consolidation is good because telecom definitely has network effects. And now to sort of say that the sector is providing these benefits, and we need to sort of capture those benefits, and those benefits can be captured when you have competition in terms of large number of players, I think would be a folly, because we know through sort of experience across the world that markets can be competitive even if there are a few number of players in the industry, and that it remains slightly contestable, which means that you can have entry anytime in the market. And given that what you have in terms of unlicensed players as well coming in the market, they provide a significant amount of competitive pressure to the incumbents within the industry. So, I would say tread with caution when you're trying to regulate and err on the side of, being less intrusive than being more intrusive. And the reason I think this is important today is because telecom, I think the old voice story has gone. Consolidation is happening. There's huge disruption, as we know, and there's the labor market disruption also going on, which I'm not going to talk about. But there's another disruption that is happening, and this story is even more important in that, lest we lose sort of the impacts that data can have on the economy. And the data has been characterized variously and severally by people as data being the new oil, or if you talk to other people, they think that data is the new toxic. And I think this has to be balanced, especially in the interest of our economy, in the interest of our innovation. So gone are the days of voice, I think. It's going to be, of course, IP networks, but data is going to be very important. And how to regulate the data economy based on the experience of the past, which is, as I said, you have gone from a period of intrusive regulation to a period of soft touch regulation, and that, I think, should be the characteristic or the feature of regulation that defines this sector, not only this sector, that defines and there are examples of that. Who would have thought when Vodafone and Idea merged that the Competition Commission, which is also a regulator, that they would have taken a stance that encouraged the merger. I mean, I worked in the regulator, and 15 years ago, I would never have imagined that this sort of merger could have been allowed. And I think that's that's a good example of how we should proceed in the future, because network effects will mean that you will have dominance in market structures. That doesn't mean that necessarily will translate into abuse. And if that sort of idea or that characteristic is kept in mind, then one can approach the data economy a lot more, I think, constructively from the point of view of our economy. And the reason I say that is because, data, telecom networks have allowed markets to work much more efficiently. And data will do that doubly. The markets will become more efficient. Think of Olas, think of Ubers, think of how demand and supply matching is happening. Yes, definitely there are questions of surveillance, there are questions of privacy, there are questions of abuse of data. That will be there. I mean, there is no point saying that there will be no abuse, but we should not sort of lose sight of the fact that there are significant benefits that emerge from data economies. Market failures become less sort of pervasive. They become less intense. Markets work much better when you have a lot of data, but you have to respect. So if you're going to innovate, one has to also respect the fact that data is a private resource, but not to then say that I'm going to regulate it intrusively. And the reason I think we have to be cautious about this is recently the government has come out with policies which will probably make it difficult for the data economy to flourish in the manner that we hope it will flourish. This is not an easy thing to do. Regulators will need to be on the ball. They'll need to learn while on the job, and it will be a difficult enterprise. I think regulation is not easy, and my experience suggests that the operators are always one step ahead of the regulator, and that will continue to happen. But I think the message that I want to leave with you in the short time that I have to spend with you is that the distrust between private and public sectors that has historically, I think, existed in India and continues in some way to exist. We need to overcome that, all right? And recognize that private enterprise can deliver results, and private enterprise has delivered results for India and will continue to deliver results for India. That's a big message. And the second message is that, don't knee-jerk reactions to overregulate the new oil or the new resource that we have in our midst could turn out to be counterproductive. At the same time, government has to regulate the market and, regulate in a sense more efficiently. As we see across the world, of course, give or take a few countries, there is a new role for government, especially after the financial crisis. There's a new role for government. Government is withdrawing from most sectors of the economy, including in India, and the new role for the government is to become an efficient facilitator, an efficient regulator. And I think that stance would be even better informed if it were played that role in the telecom sector, especially at the time of digital disruption and consolidation. And it's important that we learn from our own past experience and the experience of some other countries in this sphere. So, Ibrahim, thank you very much for inviting me to this August session, and I wish the conference and the awards all success. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Kathuria, and I think you have very aptly set the tone for some of the things that the sector has to be very optimistic about, and also some of the things that the sector has to be very cautious and careful about. Thank you so much.